This video is going to be a commentary piece based upon my observations of the Detroit Lions offense during the preseason. It's way too premature to make evaluative or complete statements, but we have established a number of things, if you ask me, through 3 games that are still present in Detroit's offense, and that's under John Morton. Right? I'm going to go through some of them here. This is not a film study video, to be honest with you. There's no reason to produce one this close to the 4th preseason game. It's kind of ridiculous that Detroit has to play 4 preseason games. For a lot of reasons, it would be a waste of my time. First of all, the YouTube content ID system is a mess. It's going to cause issues once you get more than 4 or 5 days beyond a previous game. So this is just commentary. I will have some actual film of the Lions offense out over the weekend or perhaps early next week, and I mean 2024 film. This is just commentary based upon my observations of what we saw with Ben Johnson's scheme the last 2 or 3 years, what I think I understand about it, and how Morton is retaining a lot of it or trying to advance certain elements, in my opinion. First, it's kind of unbelievable, like I said, that they have to play 4 preseason games. I suspect that Detroit's staff is really done with their evaluation of certain positions or players, and most likely really doesn't need this 4th preseason bout, the one against the Texans, in order to know what they've got heading into week 1 in Green Bay. But let me give you some scheme stuff to begin. And this is my observations based upon the offense we've seen so far, which I estimate to be roughly 5 to 7% of the overall offense that we're going to see. So some of this is speculative, but I feel like my knowledge of the Lions' offensive scheme the last 2 or 3 years is quite extensive. So I think Morton clearly still has a focus, an intent really, to attack to the boundary. We have not seen some of the design things that Ben Johnson unveiled, right? Much of it, like the trick plays or somewhat anomalous stuff, was for whatever reason against the Bears. I don't know why, but we haven't seen those things. Well, it's a preseason; they don't need to. And what I mean is, 11 personnel and then plays that are created to go into some space in the boundary that's created in a somewhat irregular or unique manner. The 2 teams I get the chance to cover the most, the Ravens and the Lions, they're very similar in that regard. The last 2 years that they use personnel to control what the defense does, formations also, and then they have a scaffolded list of plays to use to attack you either to the field or the boundary, depending on how the defense is lined up. I don't think Morton's needed to reveal much. Right, it's the preseason, and kind of who cares about the results? Obviously, things have been basic, but there's definitely some intent to still attack into the boundary, make you, the defense, account for every foot or every yard of width that's on a 100 by 53 third football field. These are what I would say are preseason markers for me or indicators to what Morton's still going to do that Ben Johnson did. The second one, and this one's huge, and perhaps I won't do a great job of explaining it. I think it's something that isn't ubiquitous across NFL teams. In fact, it's very rarely seen. That's running from a one-back formation to the weak side. Now, this often overlaps with boundary side plays. I'll try not to go in too long of an explanation here, but some offensive coordinators will not run to the weak side of a formation out of a one-back situation at all. The only time they'll run to the weak side is if there's a fullback in the backfield or a tight end on the opposite side who does like some type of kick out block, like on a split zone concept. And that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to a direct flow inside zone to the weak side to keep you honest into the boundary, sometimes to the field. Greg Roman, the former offensive coordinator of the Ravens, who's now with the Chargers, he was one of them. You could look at his personnel group. Okay, it's 21. The formation, unless the fullback was leading to the weak side, they weren't running there. You may think this is not large scale point or something that's worth your time. I think it's important because Ben Johnson was consistent. He's going to force you to defend both sides of the formation, even if it's only a 2-man surface. That's the weak side. 2-man surface means a guard and tackle to one side of the formation. Going to make you defend it, and I think Morton will too. He's done enough of it in the preseason for me to say it's the same idea in that regard. Basically, and also it forces the expectation for the offensive line that you have to be able to execute this. I can add some film to this thought later, perhaps if you want. 2020 looks like 2024 film is cleared for use on YouTube with no content or no copyright content stuff be claimed. Combining those first 2 points, 1 and 2, Morton is definitely holding up to the under center play concepts as a foundational element. I know Kyle Allen and Hendon Hooker do not appear as capable in the shotgun as Goff. There's a wide gap there. So it makes sense to limit their exposure. I mean, Allen and Hooker, especially with backups or some third string offensive line. But I can see the same dynamic occurring in 2025. That's been a big element for Detroit the last 2 or 3 years. And that's the quarterback post snap with his back turned to the defense. And a run threat in the case of David Montgomery or Jameer Gibbs, possibly getting the football. And you as a defender don't know whether it's going to be a handoff or a play action. There's that threat of the play action to basically put the defense in conflict as long as possible. It's a classic setup, and it also does obviously hinge on the effectiveness of the offensive line. I still think there's a ton of talent left there on the offensive line, and you've got one of the best O line coaches in the league in Hank Fraley. If you can't tell, if you want to interpret my comments as trying to be encouraging, go right ahead. This is me telling you what I think, and it happens to line up with probably what some of you feel or presume about the season. Fraley's return to Detroit's staff for at least another year was huge. It's a big benefit for the Mahogany, Glasgow, Radledge group on the interior. Do I think they will be effective? They will get things accomplished. Are they going to be as clean, as dominant, as quick to recognize things as Ragnow and Zeitler, who were next to each other for last year? No, right? But those three guys can certainly play. I'm a big fan of Mahogany. I really can't wait to see him play in the regular season. They can definitely execute the multiple run concepts that the Detroit Lions offense was built on. Here's what I mean. They run both zone and gap schemes, maybe not equally, but they use the zone schemes, in my opinion, to set up the gap stuff. And I think that's an under discussed maybe aspect to Detroit's success. They didn't really care whether it was a zone or gap scheme to get the job done. Some people act like it's got to be one or the other. And I think the multiple approach that Detroit has taken the last couple of years has really benefited them, particularly in the third quarter and beyond. I know that some would say, well, Ben Johnson's score per quarter in the third quarter wasn't great prior to 2024. I do I do want to return to some scheme stuff here in a little bit, but I want to present you with something that is going to come out positive slash encouraging for you as a Lions fan, and it lines up with something that I have been working on during the offseason. And I'm going to link it to the preseason if you'll give me a little bit of leeway here for a moment. The prowess of Detroit's offense in 2024 and 2020, as well as parts of the preseason, lines up with a win rate that I think is expected or should be of a certain standard. Is it 11 wins, 12 wins, 13? I don't know. But in order to discuss this, I have to kind of present you with something that I'm trying to create or I have created. And thanks to Ty in our Lions Discord, we've been able to back map an offensive efficiency rating that we call TOER dating all the way back to 1999. I will show you the website here in a moment that documents all of those things. Essentially, we've created a one game score range for the offense. That score goes from 0 to 100, 100 being the best, which is nearly unachievable, and 0 being quite awful. The only team that was 0 for any games last year was the Buffalo Bills. My original run of the formula in their Week 4 loss to the Ravens was a 0, but it ended up being a 4 once Ty wrote the code for the website / the app. So I'm going to relate this to you using preseason information, and then I'll show you some stuff from the Lions 2024 season and how it stacks up with Bills and Ravens offense and also some historical offenses that you'll probably remember. You did show up for a Lions offense video. I do think this relates. If you don't think so, feel free to not watch the rest of it or give me a negative comment in the comment section. I looked at the first half and the second half of the Lions preseason game to try to relate this to something fresh in your. So here are the three scores that we have so far for a one game metric. Again, it's 0 to 100. I'll get to week 2 of Miami in a moment. Hall of Fame game, the TOER rating scale was a 16. Quite poor, obviously, right? 34 to 17 or maybe 31 to 17 loss to the Chargers. Week 1 against Atlanta, the suspended game is somewhat irregular in terms of judging it. It's a 17-10 win / suspended initially. would have, developed some more offensive stats, but it was a 48. League average is a 58.57 for the TOER metric. So 48 wasn't too bad, to be honest with you. Miami week 2, 24-17 loss is a 31. But if you take the first half data, the first half scores, when Kyle Allen is in, and you score a touchdown on the fourth and fifth possession, it becomes a 59. If you basically doubled the first half stats, it would be a 59. The reason why I bring all this up to you, and I'm going to show you some regular season efficiency ratings. The website is just shocking how beautiful it is and how easy it makes it for me to find offensive efficiency rating based upon the 10 categories that I have set up. In any case, there's the 3 scores. Keep those in mind. Like I said, league average is 50.57. I do quite honestly want to show off a little bit of this information, this data, and how simple it is to access for me and for people that are in my Discord or my Patreon. The Lions ended up being second for 2024. Their average tour 74.7 here. In another run of the data, I independently I got a 74.9. In any case, the Ravens were first with a 76 point. The way that it works out is there's 10 categories, and the methodology is explained a little bit: yards per play, completion percentage, rush yards per carry, points per drive. There's also some efficiency metrics: play success rate, third down conversion, red zone touchdown rate, and some stats that are somewhat situational in nature: turnovers, sacks, first downs. Penalty yards per game is a subtraction metric, or subtraction category, I should say. It will reduce points. You could actually gain 5 points by having 0 offensive penalty yards incurred over the course of a game. If we look at the categories for the Lions from 2024, you can see underneath of each category there's a descriptor: best in NFL, excellent, above average. It's the only one that was not either elite, best in the NFL, or excellent. So Lions finishing second at 74.7 to the Ravens looks, pretty amazing. Selfishly, look, do I want you to be interested in this? Yes, of course, right? I'm going to release the scores on Tuesday nights. I would like for Lions fans to tune in, especially if Detroit scores 33 points and they win, right? But this is also an attempt for me to make a final point in the end. Additional to that, I deselect or unselect QB kneels to get rid of that in the category system. I think if the defense for the Lions can be competitive and in the range of last year in terms of points per game allowed, then you're in a position to go where you want to go. Get in the playoffs, divisional round, NFC Championship game, compete for a Super Bowl. I know the defense last year was 7th overall in the regular season in points allowed. I think the talent available can get the job done on the offensive side. I'm just focusing on the offensive side because that's the point of the TOER metric system. And additionally, it's something that I had been trying to produce for earlier this week. We've been traveling. But let's get to a little bit about some of the games that I would like to mention from 2024 to give you an idea of where we can judge. So let's talk about Tampa Bay week 2. All the way over to the right, hopefully you guys can see this well. The TOER metric 0 to 100 was a 59. Of course, we know that's a loss. I think 20-16. Down to the bottom, the other loss in the regular season, Buffalo, week 15. The TOER score for the Lions offense was a 66. Only 2 games or 3 games below that number, below that 66 number. You had Houston in week 10 when Goff threw 47 interceptions. He'll come back to win in a dominant second half. You did have the 65 that I mentioned, or excuse me, a 65 against Tennessee, partially because you got a short field so many times. Number one. Also, one thing that can be done on this website is you can go in each category, you can get 10 points. You can look at the categories for week 8 against the Titans, and yards per play, 0 points, so it would have been below 4.1 yards per play. Turnovers, 10. There was no turnovers. Pass completion, 10. That means it was above 67.5. Rush yards per carry is set at 4.7 or above 4.7, so they got 10. Sacks, -1. I think that's 3 sacks, or maybe it's 4. The point is, each category allots 10 points. And over the course of the 10 categories, the 11th being subtraction, the penalty yards, you get a one-game score output from 0 to 100. And the reason why I'm bringing up these scores in the 65, 66, even the 56 range, and the 66 against Buffalo is because when we looked at the data, we found 33 games from last season whereby the two teams scored in the average range. So I want to call the average range one standard deviation above the mean. The mean was 50.57, and the standard deviation was 14. That number seemed a little big to me, so I ran it multiple times. In any case, for games, where both teams scored between a TOER metric between 51 and 64, so one standard deviation above the mean. That happened 33 times, according to the data that I was able to go find manually. In those games, the team with the higher TOER metric won 27 of the 33 games. So the question that I have for you, as a Lions fan who may or may not be optimistic about new offensive and defensive coordinators, somewhat diminished or different offensive line, is do you think with the offensive talent that you have, experience and toughness that those guys bring to the table, bring to the equation, Jared Goff, St. Brown, Montgomery, Gibbs, who's absolute lightning, electric player, I think one of the top 10 offensive weapons in the entire league. You think that collection of guys with Dan Campbell as the head coach is going to be able to give you consistently something above a 68 score according to this metric system? I do. That's really the point of the whole video. I think that they can get to an offensive efficiency output that maybe it doesn't reach 74.7 for the year. And I'll give you some historical comparisons in a moment that will allow you to understand what I mean when I say that 74.7 is an excellent score. It's actually in the 99th percentile for all data dating back to 1999. So I just want to briefly show that off. You can see scores all the way dating back to 1999. I want to give you some comparison for the Lions 74.7 score from 2024. Look, rule set's different. The refereeing is clearly very different. So the advantages are all to the offense. Let me show you the Kansas City Chiefs offense from 2018. Universally recognized as one of the best offenses ever. Best in the NFL at a number of categories. Elite in multiple others. The only one that they really struggled with was penalties. They were last in the league. The Chiefs' TOER average for the entire season, it's really a one-game metric, but you average it out, was a 69.8. The rules are slightly different from 2018 to 2024. They've definitely been softened, if you will. But I think the Lions compare favorably. Even if you want to subtract 5 points and make them equivalent, go right ahead. Let's look at another team, 2019 Baltimore Ravens. Of course, short-circuited in the playoffs. Their season-long TOER metric was a 71.33. I'm doing this live on the website, so that's why it's probably delayed. My point in showing you all of this is I don't see the Detroit Lions offensive efficiency dropping below. This is 69.1. My apologies. I thought it was 71.3. That's for the Ravens 2019, the historic season, Lamar Jackson's first MVP, when they went off and ran the ball pretty much on everybody. I don't see the Detroit Lions offense taking that many steps back. I really don't. It actually annoys me a little bit that so many podcasts that I go on, Ravens, Seahawks, or otherwise, ask me, hey, how big of a step back do you expect the Detroit Lions to take? My answer usually is no. And what I mean by that is I get asked that question consistently, and I say, which of the I have said this to a couple of people who have some knowledge of the TOER metric formula that we've created. I say, how many of these teams in the top 10 do you expect to take a huge step back? They're like, well, that's not what I asked you. I said, well, I don't think they're going to. Did the 2019 Ravens offense take a step back in 2020? Yes, they did. Did the 2000 New England Patriots? Oh, by the way, theirs was 69.8, so just below a 70. Did they take a step back in 2008? They were still really good, but they certainly didn't go undefeated. The reason I mention these historic offenses, maybe Detroit doesn't fit there. Okay, fine. Let's say they do take a step back and they end up somewhere in the 68, 69 range for a season-long TOER ranking. Let me give you another win probability rate that we have found. And at this point, I've actually gone back and done 2023 games here as well. A TOER ranking based upon the criteria that we have of a 68 or higher. So that's more than one standard deviation above the mean. Mean is 50.57. One standard deviation above is plus 14. So we're at 68 or higher. You have an 87% win percentage in the 2024 games that I tracked, and an 84% win percentage in the 2023 games that I was able to go back and manually. Do you think the Lions can do that consistently? Is basically what I'm asking. Yes. I'm a defensive guy by nature. And I recognize that there will be some people who say, "Hey, are you saying that offense wins?" Right? I personally, I identify with the defense. That's how I see the game first. To be real, the bottom line is we have data from 2023, 2024, indicating between an 84 and 87% win percentage. If on this ranking system, this TOER rating metric, if you get 68 or higher, you win 85% of your. I think Detroit can do that. Can they win 85% of the games? I don't know. It was 74.9 last year. That's the top of the 99th percentile. It is like 2.4. The Z score is like 2.49. So basically 2.5 standard deviations above the mean. It's closer to 100 than it is closest to the third highest ranked team ever, which was the Buffalo Bills. So I recognize that the 2024 scores are, outliers because you have three teams so high above ranking. I think it's a very powerful metric. I bring it to your attention because like I said, it took me a while to kind of connect it to where Detroit is and the question that people have for them, which is, do you think that they are going to take a step back, or how big of a step back do you think they'll take? And I refuse to answer the question, and I usually just say no. With the talent that they have available, I don't see a reason to think that this offense moves so far backwards that you, the fans, are complaining about John Morton. Jared Goff, St. Brown. St. Brown's as good as it gets. You guys know what I think of him. Jamison Williams might actually take some catches from St. Brown statistically. If St. Brown ends up with a 95 catch season, is that a down year? Um, in the preseason, I think that Morton has shown a very basic vanilla offense. Nonetheless, I think it'll be a good fit. You've got some extremely prepared, sharp, talented, and utterly competitive dudes that are at the highest of their position. St. Brown, Sewell, Montgomery, Gibbs, Goff. Jameson Williams is going to take a step up in terms of production. I now reflect on the cap space remaining for Detroit in 2025, and I find myself, look, I'll be honest with you. I thought for a while, and I still kind of do, that the Lions need a D end, someone to start on the other side from Hutchinson. But maybe Brad Holmes in the front office are keeping that cap space for this season for a possible offensive line acquisition. Maybe they believe, hey, if we are efficient and we possess the football for long stretches and we can run the ball when we want and where we want to, and we're going to win 85% of our games. They don't have the same data that I do. Their data is far superior, I'm sure. My point is, it's a thought that I had preparing for this video that maybe Holmes and the coaching staff on offense in particular, Morton, Fraley, David Shaw, who I think is spectacular hire, maybe they are like, hey, we can be the bedrock of this team if the defense moves backwards a little bit from seventh in total points allowed. I recognize it's a tough schedule. The O-line perhaps won't start with the same level of consistency that you saw with Zeitler and Ragnow out there, but I'm encouraged. Don't predict wins, 12 wins, 10 wins. I don't know. Someone asked me that, a friend, a Ravens fan, do you think the Lions can win 10 games? I said, have you lost your mind? And really, in a weird way, it's a little bit reassuring for me because at least the people are being consistent. And here's what I mean. You'll recall that there was a lot of people who thought 2022 second half of the season was a fluke, right? Rebounding from a 1-6 start, get within one game or one half of a playoff berth. They also thought that 2023 was a fluke, right? That's your best chance to ever win a Super Bowl. Held the lead in the third quarter on the road of an NFC Championship game, fell short, right? You wanted a Super Bowl rematch with the Chiefs, who you'd already beaten. And then in 2024, last season, is the Lions going to take a step back? They go 15-2 with the defensive injuries being so catastrophic. I don't think this team is taking a step back. I think they're here to finish a job. I think that ultimately how close they get depends on the offense more than the defense. And really two things. One that the Lions can control, and one they may not exercise as much control over. First, it's the quality of the O-line. They can control that to an extent. And then the health of that O-line and the position players on offense. we know that you don't have as much control over that portion of it. I think with look, reflect on last year, even with the backups and third stringers in many cases, the Lions were in every game that they lost. Even the Commanders' playoff loss, they're in the game, could very easily have been there right in the fourth quarter were it not for some poor turnovers by the offensive side. If you can avoid those things and be efficient on offense, which is the point of the whole TOER metric system and why I brought it up, then you can be in every single game. Look at the Bills game, the home loss. You got no real chance of stopping their offense. Like I said, Buffalo was borderline historic for the TOER metric, number one, but also how many points they scored per game while only turning the ball over 9 times. I think the Lions defense that day, with who they had on the field, was never, ever going to be able to hold them down and stop them, let alone force turnovers, right? Certainly not do that against a team that only turned it over 9 times. My point is with a high quality O line and general good health, there's no reason the Lions can't be at 70 or above for a season long ranking and have a chance to win 85, 90% of their games. Am I saying they're going to win 90% of their games? No. You can be right there and go 14-3. You can be right there and go 12-5. You can be right there and go 11-6. I think the schedule is insane, but for me, it's a baseline. It's a floor. I'm not talking wins. I'm talking consistency at minimum. Being in the game, the 3 games that you do lose, or 4 games that you do lose, or 5 or whatever, being in a 50-50 situation in terms of turnovers and time of possession, I trust Dan Campbell, Morton, Fraley, Hall, and Shaw, excuse me, all of that whole group to stay in the game and finish you in the third or fourth quarter. Have an opportunity to. Any advantageous situation for this team, meaning when you have better personnel than the other squad. If you're +1 or +2 turnovers with this Lions team, or if there's something anomalous, right? You get a defensive touchdown or special team score, and you're +1 in turnover. Detroit will be incredibly tough to beat. It's what I believe. I believe the same thing about the Ravens, but for different reasons. And if we don't know that at this point, we really haven't been watching. Like I said, um, when I'm asked about the Lions taking a step back, I'm glad a little bit because it's the same people. It's the same people that were critical after 2022 or weren't glowing in their optimism before 2023, and they did the same thing a year ago before the 2024 season. I think this Detroit Lions group has been utterly consistent since midseason 2022. I'm talking about the core of the guys that are there on the offensive side of the ball, and I think it's the one that you can rely on as a fan to come out and produce. If you didn't enjoy this video, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I recognize it was commentary. I will put out some film with 2024 film to make some comparisons to some of the things we've seen in the preseason. That'll be a standalone project or something different from this. Hopefully you can recognize the rationale for that. In any case, if you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section, number one. Number two, if you think other Lions fans would enjoy some of my projection or my thoughts for 2025 as the regular season approaches, please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.